Hello and welcome to our first wood technology webinar. My name is Barry Nolan and I will be your presenter for the night. My colleagues Michael Lynch and Declan Regan are in the background to answer your questions and provide feedback and technical support for the broadcast. Thank you for logging in and taking the time to join us. In this webinar, we hope to reinforce your experiences from your cluster day and further develop your understanding of working with learning outcomes with a specific focus on classroom practice. I would also like to thank all the teachers we engaged with during the Wood Technology Cluster Days over the past number of months. It was great to work with so many dedicated teachers. We met 1,150 teachers in total in venues up and down the country since last November. For tonight's webinar, in your handouts tab, you will find a number of documents that we will reference during the webinar. They are the Wood Technology Planning Tool, a plan for a unit of learning we will discuss, and an editable Word document titled Exploring Learning Outcomes. If you have any questions at any time, please ask them using the GoToWebinar interface. Type the question into the questions box at any time during the webinar. We will create a queue and answer as many questions as possible during this webinar. We will take a number of pause moments to also answer frequently asked questions. As our webinar falls during National Tree Week, the Wood Technology are currently running a competition. Students are encouraged to explore the following statement from the Junior Cycle Wood Technology Specification. Trees and wooden material have a unique relationship with nature and humankind. The statement can be explored through any appropriate media, and this exploration can be undertaken as an individual or as a group. Entries can be submitted via email to jct4competitions@jct.ie by Friday the 5th of April at 5 p.m. The competition winners will be announced via our Twitter handle @jct4ed in due course. If you wish to find out more information about this competition, please check out our Twitter feed. To coincide with Tree Week, we've placed some interesting facts and questions about trees throughout the webinar, similar to the one you can see on the screen now. There are close to 4 billion hectares of forestry globally, covering approximately 30% of the land area of the planet. If you were to put all of these trees together in one large forest, this would cover an area approximately 4 times the size of China. We're just going to conduct a quick poll now. So we'll ask you to consider the question that's on your screen. What percentage of trees cut down globally in a given year are replanted? So on your screens now, you have the opportunity to select an answer. So I'll just give you a moment there, guys, to select the one you think is most relevant to the question asked. We're getting a reasonably good response rate there, so if anybody else would like to put in an answer, please take a moment to do so. I'm just currently sharing the result from our poll there. The correct answer to that question was actually 56%. On average, since 2010, 7.6 million hectares are cut down annually, while 4.3 million hectares of forestry are replanted in any given year. Over the course of the webinar, we will discuss the important role learning outcomes play when planning appropriate classroom activities for an integrated learning experience. The specification for junior cycle wood technology focuses on developing students' understanding of and skill in the application and impact of using wood as a resource in the world around them. Specification is made up of 3 interconnected contextual strands: principles and practice, wood science and materials, and design thinking. Throughout each of the strands, the use of 4 elements creates a framework for learning that ensures a coherent experience for our students. The 4 elements are planning and managing, communicating, creating, and the environment and sustainability. Wood technology uses an interdisciplinary approach which encourages the integration of the 3 strands in the teaching and learning of the subject. The specification allows flexibility and freedom for teachers to facilitate learning in a way that reflects students' own choices, their curiosities, and their creativity. The strands and elements of wood technology are made up of learning outcomes. Engagement with learning outcomes should be planned in a way that is active and stimulating. Learning outcomes are statements that describe the knowledge, understanding, skills, and values students should be able to demonstrate having studied wood technology in junior cycle. The specification stresses that the learning outcomes are for 3 years. When looking at learning outcomes, it may be useful to ask yourself the following questions. What knowledge should the students gain through experiencing the learning associated with this learning outcome? What skills would the students need to develop in order to demonstrate an understanding of this knowledge? And what values would you hope to foster in the students to contribute to their overall development? As can be seen on the screen, learning outcomes play a huge part in the construction of the student learning experience. Learning outcomes offer each individual teacher the opportunity to tailor the experience to the interests, needs, and context of their students. Units of learning, which we will explore in greater detail later in the webinar, are made up of learning outcomes and form the basis of classroom interactions. Over the course of junior cycle wood technology, students will also experience 2 classroom-based assessments. Classroom-based assessment 1, which will take place in 2nd year, is titled Wood Science in Our Environment. Classroom-based assessment 2, which will take place in 3rd year, is a student self-analysis and evaluation task. Classroom-based assessments are occasions when teachers assess students in specific assessments that are set out in the specification. Classroom-based assessments are similar to the formative assessment that occurs every day in every classroom. They are designed to be a low-stakes assessment and to be aligned closely with normal daily activities associated with our classrooms. The learning before, around, and after CBA moments are grounded in units of learning, and these units should be designed in such a way to develop the relevant skills that will be assessed. Please take a moment to consider tonight's question. How have you begun to plan for teaching, learning, and assessment in the junior cycle wood technology classroom? Feel free to share with us the steps you are taking through your Ask Question tab. It would be great for the wood technology team to get an insight into how things are evolving for teachers in their classrooms. And again, just to remind people that at any point during the webinar, should you have a question, please send it through your Ask Question tab. Here are some samples of some student work produced while engaging with a unit of learning. Before we go on to discuss how this particular unit was put together, let's first consider, what is a unit of learning? A unit of learning links learning outcomes, which clearly set out what the students should know, understand, and be able to do as a result of the learning and teaching activities within that unit. This particular unit of learning was planned for a first-year group using learning outcomes selected from across the strands and elements so as to create an integrated learning experience for the students. This unit encouraged the students to explore the world around them when looking for inspiration. It allowed space for the students to experiment with and investigate different types of wooden material, to help guide them in the selection of material, and to develop an awareness of the importance of making sustainable design choices. As the students are still in the early days of their study of wood technology, the activities were carefully scaffolded by the teacher using a student learning journal to ensure the level of design work was at an age and stage appropriate level. The learning journal provided space for the students to take notes, to make observations, and to reflect upon their work at various stages throughout the unit. Prompt questions and stimulus material, including pictures, were used to assist the students and to keep them on task. Images of this learning journal can be seen on the slides throughout the webinar. The image on your screen is of a unit of learning that is designed for a first-year group and would run for approximately 3 to 4 weeks. This unit plan is also in your handouts tab from tonight's webinar. We will now go on to consider how this unit of learning was put together. Similar to your cluster day, the double diamond design process was used when creating this unit of learning. In the discover phase, we must consider the age and stage and prior learning of our students, so as to ensure the proposed unit is of an appropriate level for the students in our classroom. In the previous unit, which was a taster program, the students learned about health and safety considerations in the wood technology room. They completed a simple practical exercise involving selection of bench tools, which involved processing a trench and cutting a curved section with a coping saw. They then applied a Danish oil finish. In this taster unit, we built on the students' prior knowledge in relation to sustainability from the wider world and looked at ways to bring this into our classroom practice. Next, it's important to consider what learning do we want to focus on. This will help us to identify potential learning outcomes once we go on to explore both the strands and elements of the specification. Having considered our students' prior learning, we must now decide on the direction we would like to take with our next unit. This is a conversation that could take place at subject department level. The area we chose to focus on was to advance our students' skill set in design thinking, to look at some considerations when selecting materials, and to consider the skills involved in the decorative shaping of wood. As this is one of the first projects the students will make, we would like to begin to create a culture within our students where they will have confidence in their own ability to create decorative work that is unique to themselves, but also to make considered, sustainable decisions in relation to the appropriate selection of materials. Throughout this unit, we will also encourage our students to reflect upon their work as it progresses, rather than just at the end. Having identified this broad area of potential learning we intend to focus on, we can now begin to identify potential learning outcomes from across the strands and elements which could support this type of learning experience. Upon examination of the planning tool, we identify many potential learning outcomes. This part of the process encourages the teacher to consider a wide range of learning outcomes prior to deciding upon the ones that will feature in the unit. When choosing the learning outcomes to support this unit of learning, it is important not to try to cover too many learning outcomes in any one unit. While there is not a set maximum or minimum number of learning outcomes that should or could make up a unit, we must apply our professional judgment and ensure the students get an integrated learning experience, but that the quality of learning for the student is not compromised by having too broad of a focus. As we move forward toward the next phase of the planning process, we can now begin to narrow our focus and make some important decisions. We will identify specific learning outcomes that we feel can be used to provide appropriate key learning for the duration of this unit, relating to the areas of learning we've identified from our focus. The chosen learning outcomes that will form the basis of this unit in our class and will also influence the type of assessments that take place. On this basis, we have selected the following learning outcomes. Learning outcomes 1.7 and 1.9 from the Principles and Practices strand. Learning outcomes 2.6, 2.10 and 2.14 from the Design Thinking strand. And outcome 3.7 from the Wood Science and Materials strand. As we outlined earlier, the area of learning we have chosen to focus on was to advance our students' skill set in design thinking, to look at considerations when selecting materials and the skills involved in decorative shaping of wood. With this in mind, please take a moment to read our chosen outcomes and consider why we have chosen these 6. Do you think these 6 outcomes could offer learning experiences to our students that will promote this type of learning? As you can also see, the outcomes are chosen from a broad range of strands and elements, which should offer our students an integrated learning experience involving design, practical craft work, and learning relating to the material that they are using. At this point, we found it beneficial to mind map our potential learning from these outcomes in order to identify key learning for our class group. We will also have these mind map sheets as a reference for future planning when we revisit some of these learning outcomes at a later date. Should you wish to carry out a similar exercise, you may find the document called Exploring Learning Outcomes on the JCT website useful here. This document is also in your Handouts tab. And now we're just going to take a moment to navigate to the website and show you the location of this document and some other resources that are available in the technology section of jct.ie. We are now on the home page of jct.ie. We'll select the technology section. Upon clicking on that tab, it will bring you to our home screen. At this point, you could click to join our mailing list and receive updates, newsletters, and subject information and details of upcoming events as they occur. There are also some useful resources on the website. You can find the PowerPoint from your PLE day and the learning log that accompanied it if you click on our CPD workshop section. In the next step, I'm going to take you to the planning section to show you where you can find the Exploring Learning Outcomes document. We must select the Wood Technology section, and upon clicking on that, it will take us to the planning section of Wood Technology. Here you'll find our digital planning tool, which has a screencast that accompanies it to help teachers in using this tool. And also you will find the planning tool that's received on your cluster day, and it is also in your Handouts tab. You can also see that there's a bar above the planning tool that says Exploring Learning Outcomes. If we click on that, it will bring us to the document that is entitled Exploring Learning Outcomes. By clicking on that document, it will open up an editable Word document, which is pre-populated with learning outcomes and the definitions of the action verbs. This document covers the 3 strands and is fully populated with all learning outcomes. So upon clicking on learning outcome or action verb, a drop-down menu will appear. From that drop-down menu, you can select your chosen learning outcome or the definition of your chosen action verb. At that point, you could either edit the document online by inserting text boxes, or alternatively, you could print the document and fill in the mind map manually. As you can see on the screen, we've just chosen to do ours with a pen as we felt it sped up the process for ourselves. Following on from our exploration exercise, where we mind mapped our 6 outcomes, we chose the following key learning. For outcomes 2.6 and 2.10, we identified that students will learn to communicate their ideas through sketching, and that they will gain an understanding of the appropriate use of templates, and we would like them to use one to mark out their workpiece. For outcomes 3.7 and 2.14, we would like our students to learn about the properties of solid wood and some manufactured boards. We'd also like our students to learn how to make effective use of the surface area of a piece of material in order to minimize waste. For learning outcomes 1.7 and 1.9, we would like to introduce our students to the concept of breaking down a design problem. We'd also like them to learn how to link a craft skill to a design and realization task. And our students will also learn about and be able to explain the application of one tool that they will use for cutting curves. At this point, it is also important that we consider what would be an appropriate assessment approach for this key learning. The action verbs must strongly influence this. At this point, we decided that our assessment approach will involve the design and realization of an artifact. The students will carry out a research or investigation task and also a written reflective task. Teacher observation and ongoing feedback throughout will also play an important role from a formative perspective for our students. Having decided on our key learning, we are now moving to the classroom context, and we will begin to consider how students could experience the identified key learning and how it could be assessed. When considering possible classroom activities, We referred back to our mind-mapped learning outcomes and focused in on the identified key learning. Initially, we looked at outcomes 1.9 and 2.6, as both of these outcomes relate to design. Our classroom activities must promote this. Students will learn to break down a design problem and communicate their ideas through sketching. We must assist our students to recognize how to link their knowledge of their craft skills to a design and realization task. To achieve this key learning, our students will explore a design and realization task, which involves decorative shaping of wood. Some possible tasks our students could undertake might be to design and realize items such as a keyring, a door sign, a coaster, an emoji, pencil holder, or any form of shaped wooden piece. This task could be processed using the coping saw, scroll saw, or band saw, allowing the students to demonstrate their craft skill. We could give a written brief or use stimulus material to provide inspiration to our students while creating design ideas. When getting students to generate design ideas and come up with solutions, it may be advisable to limit the use of the internet for looking up design ideas. By giving a brief or using stimulus material, we can foster a problem-solving approach from an early stage, which will stand our students in good stead as they progress through wood technology. When looking at learning outcome 1.7, we hope that our students will learn and be able to explain the application of one tool that they use for cutting curves. For this outcome, the students will learn how to use the tool and about its applications while realizing the task. This will be required to explain. They will be required to explain this in their own words. Some options could be to get the students to create a poster, an annotated sketch in their copybook, or complete an oral or video presentation on the use of the tool. When looking at outcomes 2.6 and 2.10, our identified key learning was that students will learn to communicate design ideas through sketching and demonstrate an understanding of the appropriate use of templates. The key learning focuses on the communication of design ideas and the use of templates. Our classroom approach must facilitate the students to firstly produce sketches and then enable them to devise their own template. Some options might be to set an appropriate design task. As a teacher, I could decide that all of my students will design one particular type of project, for example, a door sign, or I could allow my students to choose their preferred type of project from the list we generated earlier. To assist our students while sketching possible solutions, one option might be to encourage the students to use grid paper, or to encourage the students to sketch inside the footprint size of their chosen material. French curves could also be used to assist some students with curved sections. When students are designing or creating sketches, homework could be used to a greater extent to support in-class learning. By giving homework, it also raises the awareness of our subject among parents and could also provide opportunities for students to get inspiration from their homes. In order to show our students what templates are, we could show templates from a variety of media. Some options might be to show image transfer using carbon paper, or cutting out a shape on paper or card and tracing the outline onto a workpiece. A thorough understanding of our raw material will help our students make better design decisions. This understanding can be built up through learning experiences which allow the student to experiment with and investigate different types of wooden material. This will help to guide students in their selection of material and to develop an awareness of the importance of making sustainable design choices in relation to the material available to them. The key learning we identified for outcomes 3.7 and 2.14 supports this. Our students will investigate and research properties of wood through experimentation on a number of samples of solid wood and manufactured board. They will consider the size of their design in relation to the materials made available. Some options here could be to get the students to test materials made available to them for the task. They could carry out online or book research relating to these materials. And we could also have a classroom discussion about the materials and what they learned from experimentation with them. The students may then fill out a material observation sheet. Having considered options for our classroom experiences. We now again naturally move to a point where we make some decisions. We must look at our own classroom context and decide on what the best way our students in our group could experience this learning. For this particular activity, a learning journal, along with the finished artifact and ongoing teacher observation and formative conversations, provide us with evidence of learning. We chose to Students are presented with opportunities to carry out investigation, research, experimentation, engage with design during this unit of learning. Firstly, we agreed a design task and co-constructed our success criteria. The agreed task was, using only the material made available to you, design and realize a decorative artifact of your choice. The artifact must be processed using the coping saw, you must devise your own template, and you must provide 2 reasons to justify the selection of your chosen material. This is stimulus-based for idea generation, using some images of decoratively shaped artifacts and by encouraging the students to explore the wood technology room in search of items that have been cut or shaped in a particular way. This could also be a potential way of introducing the concept of ergonomics with our students. Students then filled out their observations on their learning journal. We felt it very important when engaging with key learning relating to outcomes 3.7 and 2.14 that students undertook primary research of the materials made available to them for this task. 4 samples of material were made available, each of a different surface area and thickness. 1 piece of solid wood, 1 piece of MDF, and 2 different size samples of birch plywood. Students tested the samples using the coping saw. The teacher demonstrated to the students how the solid wood tends to break if the grain is cut too short and encouraged the students to cut their sample material in such a way as to experience this themselves. The students then did likewise with manufactured boards and noticed that this breaking did not occur as easily. We then had a classroom discussion about why solid wood behaves this way and why manufactured boards tend not to. Students completed a written observation relating to some properties of materials. The properties that they looked at were aesthetics, the ease of cut, how prone the material was to breaking, splitting or chipping while cutting. They noted their observations onto the learning journal. Students were required to give 2 reasons to justify their chosen material based on the properties of the material and the minimization of waste. This experimental learning and written observation of their experiences with the materials will facilitate the students to make these decisions independently. The learning journal was designed to support and scaffold the design and research element of this task. Michael Lynch is now joining me to bring some questions from the audience.
Thanks, Barry. We have lots of questions coming in and we're endeavouring to get through those as we speak. Just some interesting points that came up. Some people are wondering where tonight's webinar will be available on the website. So we hope to have the webinar online in the next day. And when it is on the website, we'll be sending out a tweet with the link. But if you want to go to the website at some stage over the next day or so, you'll find it under the technology section. And if you click into CPD workshops and then go into the wood technology part of that, and then on the left-hand side menu, you'll find an elective workshops section, and the webinar recording will be there. We just had an interesting point as well in from Daniel O'Callaghan. He just noted that in preparing for the introduction of junior cycle wood technology, he is engaging with students doing self-assessment in class and recording their notes and grades. And we just thank Daniel for sharing that with us. And we just thought it would be useful to share it out to the audience.
That's great. Thanks very much, Michael. As you can see from the screen, the particular student that filled out this worksheet stated that they were choosing the piece of material that was 6 millimeters thick because they wanted to make a keyring, and the other materials were too thick for this purpose. Having experimented with the material samples made available to the students, decisions like that are most achievable for students in this group. When sketching out design ideas, our students were encouraged to first trace the outline footprint of the sample materials onto their sheet. This gave the student a better sense of proportion and also in some cases acted as a grid structure to assist with the sketch itself. Students could visually assess if they were maximizing the use of the surface area of the piece or being wasteful. We can clearly see from the sample on the screen that the one on the top is not maximizing the use of the surface area of that piece, but the one below very much so is. When providing oral feedback on student designs, we encourage the students to note or summarize some of our suggestions. And on some occasions, we also got students to reproduce their design sketches to implement our feedback. Perhaps the sketch was a little bit rushed or not up to the required standard. This emphasizes the process of design rather than just the finished design itself. This feedback is also further evidence of learning. Our students used their final idea as a template, which was then transferred onto their material using carbon paper. Demonstration and questioning were used throughout the practical application of the coping saw, supporting the students in their learning about the correct application of this tool. Students were then asked to create an annotated sketch of the coping saw, explaining its features to further reinforce their experience with this tool, thus engaging with outcome 1.7. As we now come towards the final stage of this plan, we will recap on our learning outcomes and their action verbs and ensure that the chosen assessment align with them. The example we're choosing to use is that students should be able to produce sketches, drawings, models and prototypes to explore design ideas. The key learning from this particular outcome that we focused upon was that students would produce sketches to explore design ideas. At all times, our learning activities ensured that the chosen action verbs were being activated. Students were indeed required to produce sketches. Our students were required to devise a template. Our students were required to demonstrate craft excellence through a design and realization task. The learning activities that took place encouraged our students to investigate ways of minimizing waste. And as a requirement of our design brief, they were asked to justify their choice of material. And finally, they were required to explain the function of one tool that they used. This was assessed both formatively and summatively through the completion of a learning journal, experimentation with test pieces, communication of design ideas through sketches and templates, ongoing observation, and feedback from the teacher during realization. The finished artifact and student reflection all provide evidence of key learning taking place. And again, the image on the screen highlights the unit plan that was put together. It's important to also consider that this unit was put together by a team of full-time JCT advisors and is an exemplar of a plan. It is hoped that teachers over time will build up the skill set in their own planning to the point at which they can produce planning like this in the future. This unit of learning was trialled in Killorglin Community College by a teacher named Dan Shea. Dan put together some of his own experiences from working with it, and you can see them there on the screen. So I'll just allow a moment for you to take a read of some of those. And again, some of the students that took part in this unit gave their feedback as well. It's interesting to see how some of their feedbacks reflects the challenges that those students faced while undertaking this unit of learning, and how the unit actually challenged the students to think for themselves independently in relation to the selection of materials and also when it came to creating their design. Again, going back to our competition theme, trees and wooden material have a unique relationship with nature and humankind. So what effect can one tree have? Stanford University recently developed a way to estimate biodiversity based on tree cover. They recorded 67,737 observations of 908 plant and animal species over a 10-year period. They then plotted this data against Google Earth images of tree cover. They found that adding one single tree to a pasture, for example, could raise the number of bird species from near 0 to 80. After this initial spike, adding additional trees continued to correlate with more species, but less quickly. And we're again joined by Michael, who's going to bring in another question from the audience.
Thanks, Barry. So there's a large volume of questions coming in, and it's great to see that engagement from teachers. So we're working through those. We will probably not be able to answer every question tonight, given the volume of them. So we endeavour to respond to people over the next few days via email. So we just have a question in from Jason Carey, and Barry, you probably know the answer to this. Jason, just wondering, how long was the unit that you've just walked through tonight? How long did it work out as?
That particular unit is designed to last between 3 to 4 weeks in the classroom. It's totally dependent on the teacher's own context, and also certain aspects of that unit could either take longer or shorter, depending on how you would choose to deliver them, and equally how much you would like to get from certain parts of the unit. So again, really what you will consider there is the develop stage, where options were presented to the teacher. What we chose from that particular part of the process to deliver is what I just outlined in the last number of slides. But if you would like to go back through that develop section yourself, you could see opportunities there where you could add or take away from some of that key learning that would be in the unit.
Okay, thanks, Barry. And also, we just had some teachers sending in queries regarding the competition that was mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. So the best thing to do there, if you are interested in the JCT4 wood technology competition for Tree Week, is to, if you follow our Twitter account, there'll be links and details giving information on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. Again, just for a final moment, I just encourage you to again consider our question for tonight. How have you begun to plan for teaching, learning and assessment in the junior cycle wood technology classroom? Again, feel free to share the steps you're taking to your question tab, and also if you have any further questions or queries relating to tonight's webinar, keep filling those questions into the questions tab. If you go to the technology section, the technology section of jct.ie, we also have a use of professional time, suggested use of professional time document uploaded, which you may find beneficial when you do consider this question about your own planning for wood technology in your classroom. And that concludes tonight's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Again, if you have any further questions, we'll leave the question tab open for a number of minutes, and we will endeavour to answer those questions over the coming days. Thank you for participating, and we look forward to meeting you again in our cluster model next year. Thank you.